Hello everyone. Today, I'm so glad to once again accompany you on a journey through a very special love story, the story of a single mother named lyteuca and a man who, at first, seemed to pass through her life like a fleeting breeze, but eventually became her most steadfast shelter, Tieu Hung. This isn't just a simple romance. It's a journey of healing, of two hearts that have been hurt, broken, and scarred in ways they never thought they could overcome. On one side is a woman who may seem fragile, but is incredibly resilient, a mother and father all in one, who has been quietly rebuilding a new life for her son after the wounds of the past. On the other is a successful man, seemingly cold and distant on the outside, but holding a heart warmer than anyone could imagine, and a love so sincere it takes you by surprise. They didn't fall in love with grand gestures or glittering promises. Their bond was forged in the little, quiet moments of everyday life, a warm meal after work, a glance filled with empathy when Tieu was exhausted from tending to her sick child, Hung's hands willingly carrying heavy bags for her, washing dishes, or wiping away the tears that hadn't even fallen yet. In these small and silent acts, love gently bloomed, not in haste, not with drama, but with depth, patience, and healing. And perhaps the most moving part of their story is Hung's choice to stay. He knew Tieu's past was far from perfect. He knew there would be storms ahead. But he never turned away. He loved her, not because she was flawless, but because she had the courage to face every imperfection life had thrown her way. As for Tieu, after everything, the sleepless nights, the loneliness, the burdens of raising a child on her own, she finally dared to open her heart. She dared to believe that happiness isn't only reserved for the lucky, but is also a reward for those who are brave enough to love again. So how will this love story between single mom lyteuca and Tieu Hung unfold? Will they be able to overcome the judgments, the barriers from society, from the past, and come together completely? Join us in the next episodes to witness this moving and hopeful love journey. And don't forget to subscribe, leave a heart, and share your thoughts in the comments if you too believe. Love is choosing to stay, even when things get the hardest. Lyteuca, her name sounds as gentle as the morning breeze in a peaceful countryside. Yet, ironically, her life has never known a single day of true peace. She was born into a poor family, where a full meal was a luxury, and a girl's fate was little more than a bargaining chip. While other children played freely and were lulled to sleep by their parents, Tieu learned to stay silent, to endure, and not to cry, because even if she did, no one would come to comfort her. At 17, she was sold by her parents to become the wife of a stranger. No one asked if she agreed. No wedding dress, no ceremony, just a cold nod from her father, a handshake, and she was married off like a debt being paid. The man, her so-called husband, was a violent drunk, addicted to gambling as much as he was to breathing. To him, Tieu wasn't a wife, let alone someone to love. She was an object, to serve, to bear children, and to stay silent while he drank. Every night, he came home drunk. And every night was hell. The blows, the kicks, the cruel insults, useless, cheap woman, carved themselves into the young girl's soul. But Tieu didn't cry. She held her belly, lowered her head, and thought, if I just endure it, maybe the family will stay together. Then, her first child was born, a baby girl with sparkling eyes like the waters of a mountain spring. To Tieu, she was a miracle. Holding her child close, she felt, for the very first time, the warmth of unconditional love, a little life that called her mom. But instead of joy, her husband erupted in fury. A girl? A woman who can only give birth to girls. No congratulations. No gentle glance. Just a stream of vile curses and a slap that left her seeing stars. From that day on, Tieu was no longer a wife. Not even a person. She was a thorn in his side, one he was ready to rip out at any moment. And that moment came sooner than she expected. On a stormy day, while she was cooking porridge and humming to her baby, he stormed in, hurled a bowl at the floor, and screamed, "Get out! You and your daughter, out of my house!" Tieu fell to her knees, pleading through her sobs. I'm pregnant. It's your child." But he only laughed bitterly. "My lover's pregnant too. But with a boy. You? Get out of my sight." With trembling legs, she cradled her little girl, her 3-month belly barely showing. She stepped out of the only place she'd ever called home, no money, no destination, no one waiting. What followed was a long, suffocating stretch of hardship. She wandered from market to market, begging for work, dishwashing, sweeping, carrying loads. Her belly grew, her daughter grew, but life remained small and fragile, like a straw nest under a crumbling roof. On freezing winter nights, she wrapped her coat around her daughter and curled up to block the wind from her unborn child. When someone kindly gave her a loaf of bread, she broke it in half, one for her daughter, one bite for herself, and the rest hidden away for the next day. Because to her, as long as her daughter ate, she could go hungry. As long as her daughter lived, no sacrifice was too great. Still, there were moments when she nearly gave up. Watching her daughter grow weak from hunger, she once thought of ending it all. But then came a feeble whisper through a fevered breath. "Mom, don't die. If you go, who'll sing me to sleep?" In the darkest pit of despair, in the nights that seemed like they would never see light again, a miracle began. One early morning, as she coughed her way through the cold, carrying a basket of recyclables, a luxury car pulled up beside the curb. The door opened, and out stepped a man. He didn't resemble anyone she'd ever known. He didn't look down on her. He didn't pity her. He simply handed her a cup of warm tea and asked with quiet sincerity, "Do you need help?" CEO Hung knew Tieu's circumstances. He knew she was a single mother, knew she was pregnant. He knew her ex-husband had thrown her out just because she gave birth to a daughter. He knew she had once lost everything, had crawled through the very bottom of society. But he never looked down on her. On the contrary, he respected her even more, and his heart ached for her. He helped her find a temporary place to stay. He helped take her daughter to school. He made sure she had regular prenatal checkups. But more than any material support, what he gave her was respect. A gentle gaze that didn't see her as a burden, but as a woman worthy of being loved. At first, Tieu was hesitant. She was so used to society's contempt. She no longer believed she deserved love. She rejected Hung more than once. She told him, I'm not worthy of you. I have a child, and I'm pregnant." But Hung simply smiled, his eyes unwavering. "I know. But I don't love you for your past. I love you, because you're you." Their love didn't come in a rush. It wasn't fireworks or fairy tales. It was quiet, steady. Like the soft drizzle of spring rain. A glance. A touch of the hand. A bowl of porridge when the child had a fever. A coat draped over her shoulders when the wind blew cold. And somewhere along the way, love blossomed, so naturally, no one even noticed when it began. But perhaps the most touching of all was how Hung treated Tieu's eldest daughter, little Tieu. Though she wasn't his blood, he never once treated her as someone else's child. He walked her to school, read her bedtime stories, drew pictures with her every weekend, and gently held her close whenever she was sad. He told Tieu, Your child is my child. And the unborn baby in her belly, the one her ex had abandoned, rejected, to Hung, was a sacred life. He took her to every prenatal visit, sought out the best doctors, cooked nourishing soups for her to stay strong. He whispered, "Don't be afraid. I'll be here when the baby is born." And long after that, Tieu, the woman who had once been pushed to the bottom, who once thought she wasn't worthy of love, was now beginning to believe in miracles. Not because life suddenly became easy, not because her scars disappeared, but because she no longer had to carry it all alone. Because beside her now stood a real man, not only shielding her with his arms, but walking beside her in silence, through every storm that remained ahead. Knowing that Tieu was pregnant, frail, and still had to care for her young daughter alone, Hung couldn't bear to see her continue living a life of constant moving, worn out, unsafe, and uncertain. Silently, he pondered, and then made a life-changing decision. He would build a small farmhouse on the outskirts of the city, a place with fresh air, fertile soil, and the peace needed to start over. He didn't say much. He simply brought Tieu and her daughter to see the land. Standing on the open, leveled ground, with the wind rustling through the trees, Tieu was speechless. She couldn't believe it. The man who was once just a stranger had now done something so grand, for her and her children. "From now on, this place is yours," Hung said, his voice firm yet gentle, like soothing a heart that had been bruised for far too long. "I'll build a home, a garden, enough for the three of you to live comfortably." And he didn't stop at words. He got to work immediately. A modest house design was drafted, simple, yet cozy, and fully equipped. He hired the best local builders, called in a trusted crew, and oversaw every step, ensuring everything was done efficiently, safely, and with care. Next to the house, he designated a patch of land for a vegetable garden, trellises for gourds and squash, rows for water spinach and mustard greens, all easy-to-grow crops that Tieu could tend to once she regained her strength. He knew she had grown up familiar with farming, so this wouldn't be foreign to her. But this time was different. This time, she would plant for her own kitchen, in her own garden, on a piece of land no one could ever take away from her. And he didn't leave her to do it alone. Despite being a busy CEO, Hung made time every weekend to help. Some days he rolled up his sleeves to carry bricks. Other days, he knelt beside her to prune the newly sprouted herbs. Tieu would bring little Tieu to the garden too. They'd plant seeds while telling fairy tales under the sun. That atmosphere, simple and quiet, wasn't something people usually wrote about in love stories. But it was warmer than anything she'd ever known. Whenever Hung saw her fatigued from the pregnancy, he would softly ask her to rest inside, then finish her work himself. The laborers, witnessing his gentleness and sincerity, began treating Tieu not as an outsider, but as one of their own. It was Hung's presence, his meticulous care for every brick, every seedling, that made it clear to everyone. This wasn't just a house. It was the beginning of something deeply meaningful. The first days at the farm passed peacefully. It felt as though life had finally begun to smile upon Tieu. But then, an unexpected storm struck, just as she entered her 7th month of pregnancy. That day, the air was thick and dry. The wind blew hot, and the sun scorched through the unfinished window frame of their half-built home. Despite feeling exhausted, Tieu still stepped into the garden to check on the fragile seedlings just taking root. But she had barely walked a few steps when she suddenly clutched her belly and collapsed to the ground. A sharp, unbearable pain surged through her. Tears streamed down her cheeks, but she couldn't even cry out. Blood began to seep through her dress. And she knew she was going into preterm labor. Luckily, at that very moment, Hung had just returned from the city. He spotted her doubled over in the dirt, drenched in sweat, her body trembling. Panicked, he ran to her without thinking. Scooping her into his arms, he rushed her into the car, one hand on the wheel, the other holding tightly to her shaking hand. "Hang in there, sweetheart. Stay with me. I'm right here, I won't let anything happen to you or the baby." For the first time in his life, Hung was truly terrified. A man who had faced countless billion-dollar deals, major corporate battles, decisive boardroom showdowns, now found his heart breaking, trembling. Because of one woman. The delivery took almost 5 hours. Tieu was rushed into the emergency room, while Hung sat outside clutching a teary-eyed Tieu, who couldn't stop asking, "Uncle Hung, is Mommy going to be okay?" He gently pulled her into his lap and whispered, "She'll be fine. Your mom is strong. We just have to wait a little longer." Finally, the weak cry of a newborn pierced the silence behind the delivery room doors. A tiny, fragile life had arrived, too soon, barely formed. The doctor came out and announced, "The baby is premature. He needs to be moved to an incubator immediately, he can't go home yet." Tieu, utterly exhausted, didn't have the strength to open her eyes. Tears fell as she realized her baby couldn't be by her side. But beside her was Hung, holding her hand tightly, his eyes calm and steady, the anchor she didn't even know she needed. He didn't leave the hospital for even a second. He handled all the paperwork, took Tieu home and cared for her. Then returned every morning, feeding Tieu warm porridge, hand-washing her patient clothes with quiet care. A few days later, when the doctor finally allowed her to be discharged, Hung was already prepared. "You're not going back to that unfinished house," he said. "I've set up a room for you and the baby in my home." She hesitated, flustered. But he spoke again, gently but firmly, leaving no room for argument. "I can't let you stay alone right after giving birth. And more than that, this is my responsibility, not as a friend, but as your husband." What followed was perhaps the strangest period in Tieu's life. Because for the first time ever, she was cared for like someone's wife. Hung would wake early to cook her nutritious meals. He'd take Tieu to school. Every evening, he would ask about her incision, her pain, her energy. He didn't do it out of pity. Not out of obligation. He did it because he loved her. A love that had grown through every shared moment, every silent gaze, every hurt she had endured that he wished he could carry instead. And it was in those long nights, sitting together by the NICU waiting for updates on the baby in the incubator, that their bond became clearer than ever. No fancy words. No faraway promises. Just his presence, steady and unshaken, every time she turned around. Just his gaze, unchanged even when she was pale, tired, and without makeup or strength. And that was enough for her to know she was no longer alone. It was an early Monday morning. Sunlight had just begun to peek through the window when Hung's phone rang. It was a call from the hospital, where Tieu's premature baby was still in intensive care. The doctor spoke gently, yet with unmistakable hope in his voice. "The baby's condition has improved. His lungs are beginning to function well, and his sucking reflex is now clear. Starting today, he can begin feeding on breast milk." Hung looked over at Tieu, who was sitting on the sofa, gently stroking little Tieu's hair as she slept peacefully in her lap. Her eyes still carried the fatigue of childbirth. But when Hung repeated the doctor's words, those tired eyes lit up with something pure and radiant. "He can drink my milk. she repeated softly, as if she couldn't quite believe it, her voice trembling, a rush of emotion welling up in her chest. That very morning, Hung quietly got everything ready. A breast pump, milk storage bags, insulated containers, even a soft towel to wrap around the bottle to keep it warm. He prepared it all with such care. Not just like a helper, but like a father preparing for his own child. When Tieu finished expressing the milk, Hung personally delivered it to the hospital, gently handing it to the nurse with both hands. Behind him, Tieu stood quietly, holding her belly, her face filled with a mix of worry and gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered. Hung turned and smiled. "We're doing this for our baby. You don't need to thank me." Knowing that Tieu's health was still fragile, and that she would need to express milk regularly, Hung arranged for a luxurious suite at a 5-star hotel near the hospital. A quiet, spacious room filled with natural light, soft bedding, and every amenity she could need. So she could rest properly, feel at peace, and nurture her body and mind to give the baby the best nourishment possible. Every morning, Hung would stop by, bringing warm food, fresh fruit, and vitamins. In the evenings, he would sit with her on the balcony, chatting gently so she wouldn't feel lonely or overwhelmed. And during those quiet nights, under the soft city lights, their bond deepened, silently, steadily. But Hung never forgot Tieu, the little girl who always held the center of Tieu's heart. He was more thoughtful than any biological father could have been. One weekend afternoon, he took both mother and daughter on a stroll through the city. To the Central Park, where the Ferris wheel spun slowly, balloons danced in the breeze, and toy stands gleamed with color. Tieu was gifted a giant teddy bear, a pink princess dress, and a lollipop she refused to let go of the entire afternoon. Her face beamed with pure, radiant joy, a kind of joy few had ever seen from her. Because before Hung came into their lives, little Tieu had never known such carefree afternoons. Tieu stood in silence, watching her daughter skip through the golden glow of sunset. Hung walking slowly behind, eyes never leaving the girl, ready to catch her if she stumbled. She said nothing, only tightened her grip on the strap of her bag, where she had carefully packed the next bottle of milk for her baby still waiting at the hospital. In that moment, her heart trembled. Not from weakness, but because for the first time, after all the pain she had endured, she felt something she thought she'd never feel again. Maybe life still held beautiful things when you are loved the right way. That day, the sky was overcast, shrouded in layers of gray clouds, as if mirroring the heaviness in Hung's heart. After wrapping up his work, he drove from the hotel, taking Tieu and Tieu home early to rest. Then, he quietly turned onto a familiar road that led to the private villa of an old friend, CEO James, a brother in all but blood, someone who had stood by him through countless battles in the business world, including the joint timber venture they co-managed. James greeted him with a silent gaze, stripped of his usual composure and sharpness. It was clear, something was weighing on him, something that even his seasoned shoulders had trouble bearing. Hung didn't ask. He simply sat down across from him on the sofa and passed him an already opened can of beer. It was a while before James finally spoke. His voice was hoarse, heavy as stone. "John's been arrested." Hung froze for a brief second and set his drink down. John, once James's most trusted subordinate, was also the man behind the incident that led to Diep's disappearance, the woman James loved, the woman who vanished without a trace. Police confirmed his involvement in Diep's assault, James continued. "But Diep, she's still missing." The words sliced through the quiet room like a blade of ice. James bowed his head, fingers interlaced, trembling ever so slightly. He was the CEO of a vast corporation, a man who had steered thousands of numbers, hundreds of employees. Yet in that moment, he was just a man undone by the deepest kind of helplessness. The failure to protect the one he loved. Hung remained still for a while. Then, gently, he placed a hand on his friend's shoulder. He didn't mention Diep, because no words could ease that kind of ache. Instead, he began, softly. Tieu gave birth. Premature, at 7 months. The baby's still in an incubator. She expresses milk every day to bring to the hospital. I'm juggling the house, the baby, her recovery. James looked up, surprised for a moment, then sank back down again. 2 men. 2 fates. 2 love stories, each shaped by a different kind of loss. Yet both bound by the same quiet agony, helplessness. They had power, wealth, companies, homes. And yet, the one thing they wished to hold on to most, the women they loved, remained just out of reach. They sat in silence, the golden lamplight casting long shadows on 2 faces once so unshakable. Now, only quiet sorrow lingered. Neither man said another word. But in that silence lay a language deeper than speech, the kind understood only between those who've been through too much. One man was clinging to the fragile breath of a premature child and a woman barely holding on. The other, to the fading hope that somewhere, in this vast world, the woman he loved might still be alive. In that moment, there were no CEOs. No contracts. No business strategies. Just 2 hearts quietly bearing the ache of having once vowed to protect someone, and failing, despite everything. While Tieu was gradually recovering, and life with Hung was finally beginning to find its rhythm, a new disturbance quietly emerged. This time, from a past she thought had been buried forever. Her ex-husband. The man who had once thrown her and her child out without a shred of remorse, returned. He came without warning, in a worn-out, almost unrecognizable state. His face was dark, his expression lost, a mix of confusion and bitterness. The news he had recently received struck like a blow to his male ego. The same ego that once convinced him he had control over everything. The woman he had left Tieu for. The one he trusted so blindly that he abandoned his wife and daughter. Was never carrying his child. Worse, she had deceived him. Taking most of his wealth and leaving him penniless, a man who once walked with pride now brought to his knees in just a few short months. As he hit rock bottom, he stumbled upon news that Tieu had given birth to a son. A boy, his biological child. The same child he had once heartlessly denied. And now, that boy felt like a lifeline amidst the storm of his crumbling world. He began searching. He asked around old acquaintances, wandered through the marketplace where Tieu once worked, even loitered near hospitals in the city, hoping for a sliver of information. But what was more terrifying than his return was the intention behind it. He didn't just want to apologize. He wanted to rekindle the past. To rebuild the family. To reclaim the son as his rightful heir. To erase his mistakes and start over. Yet he had no idea that the world had already moved on without him. In his mind, he still believed that all it would take was a few words. And Tieu, a single mother with a fragile past, would be touched enough to come back. What he didn't know was that she was no longer alone. That by her side now stood a man who loved her without condition. Who embraced her past, cherished her daughter like his own. And stood ready to raise the very child he once cast aside. And what he really didn't know was that his return could unravel everything. No one knew when. But eventually, he would find her. And when that moment came, no one knew if it would end in tears, forgiveness, or another storm altogether. Was the man who once heartlessly abandoned Tieu and her child truly coming back for love? Or was he simply broken, empty-handed, and in search of something to cling to? Was there genuine remorse hidden in his return? Or merely a calculated plan to reclaim the son he had once cruelly denied? And what about Tieu, the woman who had once hit rock bottom? Who wandered the streets with a child in her arms, pregnant and hopeless under the cold night sky. Now that she has a new home, a man who loves her unconditionally, does she have the strength to face the one who once pushed her into the abyss? Will she choose forgiveness for a past that tore her soul to shreds? Or will she close that door forever and hold tightly to the life she's slowly rebuilding? With Hung, with Tieu, and with the newborn child born into love and sacrifice? And what about Hung, the man who has always stood silently behind her, protecting, providing, loving them like his own flesh and blood? When the ex-husband returns, will he stay silent? Or will he finally step forward and say, "This is my family. She is the woman I've chosen to protect for the rest of my life"? All of it remains unknown. Because sometimes the past doesn't just stay behind. Sometimes it returns. Not to be forgiven, but to test the strength of your present and the truth of your heart. Will this unexpected reunion mark the end? Or is it the final storm before the dawn? What do you think about the return of the ex-husband? If you were Tieu, would you forgive the past that nearly destroyed you? Or walk forward, bravely, with the one who truly deserves your love now? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to stay tuned for the next episode to discover Tieu's decision, Hung's reaction, and the secret still waiting to be revealed.
Xin chào tất cả mọi người đã quay trở lại với kênh của mình. Hôm nay mình tiếp tục đưa mọi người đến với câu chuyện tình yêu của mẹ đơn thân lytieuca và CEO Hùng. Hôm nay thì ở kênh của mình nên câu chuyện này thì nó cũng có hơi mới so với những câu chuyện trước. Mình hy vọng rằng sẽ nhận được sự ủng hộ nhiều hơn của mọi người, để càng ngày mình sẽ đưa đến cho mọi người nhiều câu chuyện hay và ý nghĩa hơn. Hy vọng rằng tập này và những tập sau sẽ được mọi người yêu quý hơn, cũng như là ủng hộ giống như các nội dung trước đã lên trên kênh của mình. Ví dụ như nội dung của LyTuDiep hay là nội dung của lythuca thì mình cũng thấy là mọi người khá là yêu quý và ủng hộ. Vì vậy mình mong rằng nội dung lần này lytieuca cũng được mọi người yêu quý và ủng hộ hơn, và mình sẽ cố gắng đưa đến mọi người những câu chuyện hay nhất với thông điệp ý nghĩa nhất. Nếu như mọi người yêu quý kênh mình cũng như là yêu quý các nhân vật thì mọi người hãy đăng ký kênh, sau đó là bật chuông thông báo lên để không bỏ lỡ bất kỳ video nào mọi người nhé.